now I actually am going to get started. We are recording again. All right, so we are starting a new series today, the one on studying the Bible that y'all probably thought was boring, though it was very necessary, is over with. And we're starting the new series called This or That. You will see why when I start talking to you. But this series is on comparison. And I know that that is something that every one of you and every one of us adults struggles with. Comparison is something that never goes away. It is something that's always a difficult thing. You always want to keep up with somebody else, or you always want to feel like you're matching up with your peers. So that's what we're going to talk about. I am going to ask that you guys make sure you put your phones away, or we'll have to pull out the cell phone basket, okay? All right, so by this point in your middle school careers, you've probably been taught a little bit about different measuring systems, right? In Europe, the standard measuring system is called, do you know? The metric system, very good. So there, people use things like grams or meters and liters to measure distance, weight, and more, which sometimes we use here, but not very often. In the United States, we typically measure distance or height with inches, feet, miles, and use things like teaspoons, tablespoons, ounces, whatever for our measurements, right? So while we may have different standards for measuring things like how much flour we should put in a cake we're making or how far it is to our best friend's house, there's one standard of measurement that all people use, whether they realize it or not. That standard of measurement is comparison. Boys, no talking, please. So, you've heard that word before, right? Comparison? You've heard that word before, right? Okay, comparison, y'all, is simply when we measure something about ourselves against something about someone else. We take this about ourselves and measure it against that about someone else. You think this pair of sneakers that you have is awesome until you see that pair on your kid in PE class or whatever, right? You think this grade that you got on your paper is pretty good until you hear about that grade that your best friend got. You think this guy that you're dating is pretty cute until you see that guy that your girlfriend just got, right? Right? So see what I mean? Comparison is the way we measure this in our lives against that in someone else's. And it affects more of our lives than we probably even realize, y'all. I know we do it without even thinking. So here's the thing about comparison. It can lead us to believe things that simply are not true. Things about ourselves and things about other people. When we compare ourselves to others, we can start to believe that their lives are better than ours in some way. Because they have so many followers on Instagram, or they made the game-winning shot, or they got to take that girl to the school dance, or they have more friends than we can even dream of having. Their lives are pretty much perfect. That's what we think. They have everything they could ever want, everything we want. And because of that, we assume that their lives are amazing, even though we may know that that's not true, because nobody's life is perfect, is it? Nobody's life is perfect. Nobody. So the comparison, though, of these things leaves us feeling like our this will never measure up to their that. And when that happens, well, for some of us, that comparison leads to disappointment. Here I go, not keeping up with this thing again, but I'm trying. We're disappointed that we don't have what they have, whoever they are, right? We wonder why these are friends on Instagram, these are people that you see on TV, these are people that sit next to you in class, these might be your best friends even, right? We wonder why they got to have the cool new house, or they got the starting spot on the sports team, or they have the happy family. We think, why not me? And the more we compare, the more disappointed we are with what's in front of us. Others of us get frustrated. Excuse me. Simply put, we don't think it's fair. Don't we deserve to have the cool stuff or the big friend group or the part in the school play? The fact that someone else has what we want, what we think we deserve, well, that just doesn't feel fair. And that makes us mad Is that any of you guys? Are you willing to admit that? That's okay. Yes. That's perfectly natural and normal. There's nothing wrong with it. But maybe for you, the feeling of comparison brings into your life hopelessness. Not only do you see something in someone else's life that you want, but you feel like you'll never have it. No matter what you do or how hard you try, you'll never get to be able to be where they are or have what they have. And that makes you feel hopeless. Or maybe comparison motivates you. Oh, there we go. Instead of giving up, you decide to try harder, push faster, do whatever you have to do to get to where they are. And while motivation and hard work are not ever bad things, they can be unhealthy when the reason behind that motivation and harder work is comparison to other people. Okay? Maybe when you compare yourself to others, though, you actually feel really good about yourself. Maybe you might even think that you're better than someone else, and that you're more deserving of what you have than what they have. You might look down on others because you feel like your life looks pretty good in comparison. Regardless of how comparison makes you feel about yourself or other people, here's the thing that's true. It never really takes you anywhere. Nowhere. Because as soon as you reach that thing you want, as soon as you go from your this to their that, you find something else to compare, y'all. It's never, ever enough. The cycle never ends, and you end up struggling with those same feelings of disappointment, frustration, hopelessness, and all those things all over again. Luckily for us, though, there is a better way, a way that doesn't leave us stuck in this cycle of comparison. And, as you might guess, it can be found in the Bible. The passage we're going to look at today was written by Paul. Paul was a leader. We've talked about Paul several times. Paul was a leader in the spread of the Christian faith. He was a follower of Jesus, and he often wrote letters to encourage believers in other churches in different areas. So the letter we're going to look at today was Paul's second letter to the church of Corinth. That is the city of Corinth, and these were a church in the city of Corinth. Here's what he said. Oh, don't worry. We wouldn't dare say that we are as wonderful as these other men who tell you how important they are. But they're only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as the standard of measurement. How ignorant. Do y'all sense any sarcasm in there? Mm-hmm. I tend to think that Paul was kind of a funny guy. Okay? You can see it in a lot of his writings. This is dripping with sarcasm, in case you didn't notice. Even though Paul was specifically talking about some false teachers who were bragging, this is what was going on. Some of these false teachers were bragging about their spirituality. This is what he was saying. The same truth applies to us today. Paul was saying, listen, comparing yourself to other people stinks. It's not smart. It's not wise. It's not helpful. So don't do it, okay? That's what Paul was saying to these people in a very sarcastic way. Why? I think what Paul wanted us to know was that when we compare ourselves to each other, we're using the wrong measurement. When we hold our real life up to someone else's life on, say, their Instagram profile, when we compare the way our family looks to the way another person's family looks, or when we look at what we have in comparison to what someone else has, we're always going to end up on the losing end. Every single time. And that's because we're looking in the wrong place for the unit of measurement. I know this is not only true because of the way comparison makes us feel, but because of something else that Paul said later on in this same letter. He says, when people commend or compliment or praise themselves, it doesn't count for much. The important thing is for the Lord to commend them. It's not about how we measure up in comparison to other people, y'all. It's not about how our this stands in comparison to their that. As Paul said, that doesn't count for much. It really doesn't count at all. And a totally different lesson we could go towards, but you can't take anything with you when you die, right? You can't. Your character is what counts. And so Paul says that doesn't count for much, but what does count is this. What counts is how God sees us. That is our standard. The place that we can look to see how we measure up. And the good news is this, that God does not compare us to anyone else, y'all. God does not compare a single one of us to anyone else. How do I know that? Because of Jesus. We can look at the way Jesus treated people while he was here on earth as proof of how God sees us today. Jesus didn't rank the people around him from best to worst, did he? No. He didn't compare one single person to his own perfection. Instead, he turned the whole system upside down, basing the way he sees all people on one thing and one thing only. And that is the love of God. God isn't using the people around you as some sort of measuring stick, y'all, for you to determine your worth or your value. Instead, he's simply looking at you through his eyes. He who created you. He's looking at you through his eyes. He's seeing your life through his love. And that's a place that you will always measure up. So since this is true, and since God does not compare you to others, then what can we do to stop comparing ourselves? I want you guys to really, really think about this, okay? There's one more truth that I'm going to share with you that I think can help. It's some wisdom from the book of Proverbs that will give us an idea where to start. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Let's read that again. Guard your heart above all else, for your heart determines the course of your life. Y'all, comparison to other people starts in our hearts. It starts because something in us feels unhappy with this in our lives when we see it compared to that in someone else's. So if we want to avoid that feeling, which we should because it's not a good feeling, then we have to stop it where it starts. And that's in our hearts. As this proverb says, we have to guard our hearts. So here's some ways we can do that. 1, pay attention to your feelings. Notice the way your mood and your outlook changes when you start to compare yourself to someone else. Do you feel disappointed? Do you feel frustrated? Are you angry or anxious? Those feelings are clues that you're heading down the path of comparison, and those are a really strong signal that you are not guarding your heart properly. 2, find out what's fueling it. What are you looking at? What are you thinking about? What are you watching on TV? Or what are you doing when you start to feel these feelings of comparison? What is fueling your negative feelings of comparison? Is it a post on social media? Is it a TV show you're watching? Is it a circumstance in your life that you wish was different? Is it somebody that you follow on Instagram? If it's something in your control, you take a step away from it. I've had to do that. During all this political junk, y'all, it's not a matter of comparison, but I'm just using this as an example. You can get overwhelmed with what you see on social media. You absolutely can. And I'm not sure that you guys realize that as fully as we adults can realize that. That just looking at other people's posts, whether it's good or bad, whether you agree or disagree, just scrolling through some of that stuff can make you severely anxious. And when that also applies to comparing yourself, you got kind of a really bad mix there. So if something is in your control like that, take a step away from it. Close your app. Turn off the TV. Take a break from that friend if it's a friend, or from your group of friends, or whatever, for a day or so. Take a step to guard your heart from the things that cause you to compare yourself. And if it's something you can't control, which happens, if it has to do with your family life and there's really nothing you can do about that, but sometimes you look at your family and you're like, I really wish my family looked like that family. That's normal. That's okay. But you need to talk to somebody about it. That's not something you need to just sit around and dwell on all the time. If you're unhappy with something about your home life, maybe you have a friend that you're jealous of or whatever. There's people here, y'all. Any of these adults that are here, myself, we're all willing to talk to you about it. And no, it might not change. But there are ways to change your mindset that'll help you through things like that in life, okay? And then 3, which kind of segues from what we were just saying, is celebrate what you do have. Okay? Instead of filling your heart with comparison, fill it with the acknowledgement of the things that you do have, the things that you're thankful for, the things that you like about yourself and about your life. And again, the way God sees you is the best place to start. Make a list of that. Write down a list of the ways that He sees you. Write down all the things that you're grateful for in your life. When you're tempted to compare, stop, guard your heart, and fill that space in your heart with gratitude instead. Fill it with something that reminds you of the truth that God does not compare you to others. And also on that note, if that has to do with a circumstance you can't change, like your family or something going on in your life, there's always, always, always something to be thankful for. Always. Sometimes you might need help looking for it, but I promise it's there. So if you're sitting here thinking that you are the only one struggling with comparison, I guarantee you you're not. I can promise you that every one of the adults in this room would tell you that they also struggle with it on some level, whether it's my drill is not as good as my neighbor's drill, or whatever, like my flowers don't look as nice as my neighbor's flowers. Even adults struggle with it. Every single person struggles with this, you guys. So the good thing is that we don't have to struggle alone. One of the reasons we have these groups and we have our discussion groups is so that we have a place to talk these things through, okay? So as you're moving into your groups today, I want you to think about this one question. So why? How does comparing myself to others usually make me feel? Think about this right now. Take like 5 seconds. How does it feel to you when you compare yourselves to others? Whatever that scenario might be. Sports, friends, social media, clothes, weight, skin, anything, grades, whatever it might be. How do you feel when you compare yourselves to others? All right. Let's take ladies in here.